The natural world. Remarkable. Resilient. Ruthless. And utterly horrifying. You see, there's another side to this incredible planet. One that's equally full of wonder, but for very different reasons. A darker side of nature, rife with macabre mind control, bizarre body snatchers, and alien invaders. But this isn't some made-up post-apocalyptic horror story. These creatures are very real, very scary, and they're closer than you think. They infect. They infest. They destroy. Why do these creatures resort to such bizarre behavior? And what does that mean for you and me? What's really going on in the strange world of zombie animals? For the planet's biggest, baddest, most fearsome beasts, survival usually comes down to brute force. But for some of the planet's smallest, cleverest life forms, the path to success requires fiendish tricks and devious mind games, often using the bodies of bigger creatures to help them get what they need. And for one microscopic organism, their mind-blowing survival tactics give them the power to take on an entire army. Ants are very successful, with over 14,000 species found pretty much everywhere on the planet. And there's a lot of them. Around 20 million billion in total. But despite outnumbering almost all opposition, even huge armies of ants are vulnerable to attack, including these heavily armed bullet ants. Ferocious predators with huge, powerful jaws. Their sting is ranked as one of the most painful on Earth. But the ants have a nemesis. A force of minute particles capable of utter annihilation. And this ant has just met it, head on. The ant's beginning to act very strangely. You see, this ant is infected. But not with a virus. This ant is infected by a fungus. Cordyceps. Microscopic fungal spores traveling in the wind have taken root. Using special enzymes, the cordyceps fungus breaks down and penetrates the exoskeleton, and then invades the ant's bloodstream. Inside the ant, the cells of the fungus begin to connect and produce chemical compounds that flood into the nervous system, taking control of the ant's muscles. This ant is no longer in command of its body, or crucially, its mind. The parasitic cordyceps fungus takes over. It's like a puppeteer pulling the strings. The fungus needs the ant to climb, and the ant is compelled to comply. It's sending the ant upwards, towards optimum humidity, where conditions are more suitable. for a genius plan. Once high enough, the mind-controlling cordyceps fungus forces the ant's strong mandible muscles to contract. Powerless, the ant bites down on a leaf or stem and can't let go. The fungus needs the victim to stay put. And now, securely clamped in place, the ant is slowly devoured from the inside. But after death comes life. An alien-like structure erupts from the ant's head. It's the fruiting body of the cordyceps fungus.
But just what is going on? What's the point of this spectacular display? Well, as utterly powerful as the mind-controlling cordyceps fungus is, it does have a flaw.
The cordyceps fungus normally exists on forest floors across the world. But stuck down here, it's hard to reproduce. To ensure its ongoing survival, this body snatcher needs to disperse as widely as possible. And that's where the ant comes in. The fungus takes control of the ant's brain and directs it where to climb. Cordyceps can be remarkably specific and consistent in its desired launch location, even down to the angle of the leaf. And then by anchoring it to something solid, the hitchhiking fungus has more of a chance of developing properly and spreading its spores far and wide. The shriveled corpse of its host, locked in place, is the perfect launch pad for its own precious spores. Cordyceps has the ability to devastate ant colonies. And it's not just ants affected by this remarkable fungus. There may be as many as 600 cordyceps species, infecting a whole host of other creepy crawlies. It is relentless in its quest to reproduce. Evolving from something that started on the forest floor to a super spreader capable of mass destruction.
But in this terrifying tale of nature meets science fiction meets horror movie, us humans aren't at risk, right?
Well, there are a number of factors to take into consideration here. Firstly, we don't exactly share the same physiology as ants. Far from it. And apart from the occasional spider, cordyceps pretty much sticks to insects. They've never been known to infect any warm-blooded animal, let alone a mammal. In fact, of the estimated 5 million fungus species on the planet, only a few hundred are in any way harmful to humans.
But as our planet experiences changes like global warming, diseases and infections adapt to take advantage. Cordyceps certainly has the capacity to evolve. So could our future really witness a fungal infection-style apocalypse? Well, there are already body snatchers that have made the leap from animals to humans, and there's one that kills thousands of people every year.
It all starts with some disturbing behavior. Like this raccoon, fluctuating between sporadic seizure-like episodes and demonic, aggressive outbursts. It's hard to watch. And a coyote possessed by the same condition.
They're infected with a virus, and you've probably heard of it. This animal is suffering from rabies, one of the world's deadliest infectious diseases. Unlike the cordyceps fungus, rabies requires warm blood to thrive. As a result, mammals are its preferred host. And as the virus's one goal is to multiply, it needs to spread to other mammals. It achieves this through its own unique approach to mind control. At first, a victim may not show any telltale signs of being infected, as it can take just a few days to up to a year before this deadly germ starts to take command of its host. The virus works by penetrating the muscles and infiltrating the nervous system. Once it reaches the brain, rabies binds itself onto the receptors that control brain cell communication. By influencing these receptors, the virus can change the animal's behavior. Not only reducing their sense of fear, but making them highly aggressive too. And the infamous mouth frothing begins. But why? Well, the virus's best chance of spreading into a new host is through its victim's saliva. So it prompts the nervous system to dial up its production of drool, and it floods into the salivary glands. Paired with the animal's contaminated brain forcing it into attack mode, all it takes is one bite, or a scratch. Any broken skin where the infected saliva can get inside a new host. And it can be contracted by any mammal. In fact, rabies has been detected in over 200 species. And in the wild, it's easily spread amongst social pack animals, including those already in danger of extinction. As mammals, we humans are at risk too. Rabies has been reported to be the cause of most wolf attacks on humans globally. But it's other animals living in our towns and cities that are most likely to infect humans. In the US, skunks and raccoons are most likely to spread the disease. In Asia and Africa, where 95% of human cases occur, it comes from stray dogs. If left untreated, rabies is almost always fatal. The inflammation caused by the virus around the victim's brain and spinal cord is irreversible. Thankfully, vaccinations have curbed the spread of this mind-altering disease. If you see any wild animal acting strangely or foaming at the mouth, keep your distance. While tales of rabies-infected humans might have inspired the legend of the werewolf, rumors of mutant beings living among us sometimes turn out to be more fact than fiction. Lakes and rivers are amazing places to see wildlife. But even in the most idyllic of settings can lurk the strange and the unexpected. The United States, in the late 1990s. Reports began flooding in from alarmed members of the public. And what they'd stumbled upon was straight out of a horror movie. Mutant frogs with extra limbs. So what could be causing this mysterious malformity? A one-off? An isolated issue caused by inbreeding, perhaps? Could chemical pollutants be to blame? Or more worryingly, could these deformities be the result of a leak from a nuclear power plant? Answers were needed, and needed fast. But when this team of scientists dug a little deeper, the weird story became even weirder. Examining the deformed frogs closely under a microscope, they were able to piece together a jigsaw of clues. At the precise point where the deformed limbs were growing, they discovered some tiny white specks. It was time to join the dots. And the trail led from a frog to a snail. When they examined the snails residing in the same pond, they discovered, living inside them, a large population of parasites. Ranging in number from a few hundred to several thousand in a single snail. Although the gut of a snail may seem like a fairly disgusting place, to some species, it's heaven. And this is one of them. Riberia ondatrae, a type of flatworm. This snail has been transformed into a flatworm factory.
But what's this got to do with our mutant frogs? Well, that's where it gets really interesting. The next stage of this weird and wonderful adventure is about to begin.
In the murky fresh water, swarms of these parasitic flatworm larvae emerge from the snail, and they're now on the hunt. Once they've located the perfect place, the parasites begin to secrete a highly powerful acid, which seemingly allows the parasite to burn its way inside the tadpole. And there, the magic begins. As we all know, tadpoles don't stay tadpoles forever. When they enter the later stages of their development, they begin to grow legs and ultimately lose their tail. But the parasite is creating a glitch in the system, or even extra ones sprouting instead. As the frogs continue to grow, so do their malformed legs. But why on earth bother to go to all this trouble? What's in it for the parasite? Well, the answer isn't found in frogs, or snails, or even tadpoles. The answer is actually found in birds. Although these deformities look utterly bizarre, they actually serve a practical purpose, which ultimately benefits the parasite. You see, normally, frogs are excellent swimmers, well versed in ducking, diving, and escaping predators. Including herons. And that's precisely what the parasite needed all along. But why bother passing through two completely separate species in order to get eaten by a third? Well, the heron's gut seems to be a parasite's paradise. A breeding ground where it can fully mature and congregate with others to find a mate. They then reproduce inside the bird's digestive system before releasing their eggs via the bird's feces, which fall back into the water, where they can also offer something else to the parasite: transportation. Once in flight, the heron can travel hundreds of kilometers from where it originally took on its crazy cargo. So when it defecates into another pond far away, the parasite eggs will hatch and infect a brand new population of snails. But crucially, a long, long way from where it all started, which is essential for spreading its genetic information as widely as possible. And then the cycle starts all over again. Parasitic invader to snail incubator to tadpole terrorizer, to mutant frog, to bird food, to reproduction in the gut of a bird, back to bird feces, and ultimately into a snail again. As crazy as it seems, this is actually a brilliant method of dispersal. You see, the parasite can't travel that far on its own, but by disrupting the system, it can help its offspring to cover huge distances, increasing their chance of survival. Most body snatchers are driven by their instinct to reproduce in the most bizarre ways. But in our next story, a quirky couple take their romantic attachment to a whole new level. Our oceans are home to some of the most weird and wonderful creatures on the planet. Recent exploration has shown that life down here can get rather strange indeed. Over a kilometer beneath the surface, no light penetrates these waters. But parasites and body snatchers can be found even at these depths. Down here, the drive to survive gets wildly imaginative, including one true freak of nature. A fanfin sea devil, a type of anglerfish. This is a female, and she already looks pretty unusual with her bewitching lure. But when researchers looked closer, something even freakier was going on. A strange object attached to her belly. Is it a parasitic creature hitching a ride? The truth is far more bizarre. This tiny Klingon is actually a male anglerfish. Males of deep-sea anglerfish species are tiny and are unable to feed themselves. They only have one real mission in life: as kamikaze sperm donors. To carry out his life's work, this male has gnawed into his mate's belly and fused himself to her body. Over time, most of his organs will deteriorate, and it's only the nutrients in his partner's blood system, which now also flows through his body, that's keeping him alive. And in return for his survival, the now withered little male will fertilize any eggs she releases. A curious arrangement, but one that works, even if it is rather unequal. But there's another underwater life form that gets a lot more controlling, invading an entirely different species in its quest to produce offspring. Everyone knows about barnacles, right? They're those little shell-like things that cling to the bottom of boats. But there's actually much more to these crusty little critters than meets the eye. There are over 1,000 different species of barnacle. Generally speaking, these fairly mundane creatures keep themselves to themselves, hanging out on rocks and piers, filter feeding, making the most of any goodies that come floating by. And occasionally, they'll hitch a ride, either on the hull of a ship or sometimes ocean-going animals, like whales, and even the occasional sea turtle. But as simple as they first appear, when it comes to procreation, there's one particular species of barnacle that's far from boring. Meet Saculina carsini, a shellless parasitic barnacle. This is an adult female, and she's found her unlikely breeding partner. But let's start at the beginning. Like most barnacles, they start their life as larvae, swimming about in the open ocean. But the female larvae are on the lookout for something in particular. An unwitting host. On this occasion, a male European green crab. The female larva finds a soft joint opening in the crab's exoskeleton and prepares for the next very specialized phase in her development. Once a crab host has been chosen, the barnacle larva cements herself firmly to its shell before shedding her eye and legs, and essentially transforms into a living hypodermic needle, injecting part of herself inside the crab. This is the next stage of the parasitic plan. Now inside, she forms a sophisticated root structure throughout the crab's internal tissues, siphoning off all its nutritional goodness. Over the coming months, and even years, the barnacle grows and spreads inside the crab. And when the time is right, a fleshy sac begins to poke out of the crab's abdomen. This is the externa, the reproductive organs of the adult female barnacle. She's now fully mature, and she's looking for love. So she sends out enticing pheromones to attract male barnacles from all around, with the sole purpose of fertilizing her eggs.
Now, you might be wondering what's happened to the crab through all of this. Well, believe it or not, he's still very much alive, but he's no longer quite himself.
Scientists believe hormones released by the barnacle convince the infected male crab that he's, well, a she, which has its benefits for the barnacle. This male's not only acting like a female, he also behaves like he's pregnant and gets fully involved in motherhood. Is this what the barnacle was looking for all along? Not only has she benefited from a source of food and protection while she grows, she's also found herself an armor-plated babysitter. But once the parasitic spawn are finally released, it usually spells the end of the road for the crab, who dies. The invasive barnacle, her mission now complete, will perish with him.
For many of our planet's body snatchers, the key to survival often means playing a numbers game. Swarms, infestations, plagues, seemingly intent on taking over the world on an apocalyptic scale. And in some places, there's an army of undead waiting to rise from the ground, right beneath your feet.
Spring in the eastern United States. Night is falling. All is quiet, but life is beginning to stir. This is a sound that hasn't been heard for a long time. 17 years, to be precise. These are periodical cicadas, having slowly matured underground for almost 2 decades. They're now emerging for the first time. And when they rise as one. Not in their hundreds or even thousands. Over 1.5 million of them can be found in just half a hectare, making this the largest known insect emergence on Earth. But they're carrying with them a secret imposter. Once above the ground, they make their way to the branches of the nearest tree. At this point, the nymphs undergo their final molt, emerging from their exoskeletons like ghosts in the night. But the clock is ticking. With the dawn comes the chorus.
A once-in-17-year serenade. Predators take full advantage, gorging themselves. But still, the cicadas come, in their millions. But why emerge all at once in this way? Well, this is actually a reproductive strategy. It's called predator satiation. With so many cicadas around, the predators are flooded with food. And although millions are eaten, many more survive.
But predators are not the only threat to the cicadas. There's actually something much more sinister going on.
An infection is wreaking havoc within the brood. Another mind-controlling fungus called Massospora cicadina.
To understand exactly what's going on, we have to go back in time. Back 17 years, in fact, to the previous generation of these cicadas.
When the last brood was coming to the end of their life cycle, the females completed their final deed and laid their eggs within the branches of the trees. After 6 weeks, the cicada larvae then crawled down the tree trunks and burrowed into the soil, where they lay, feeding off the sap of the tree roots. But unbeknownst to them, the ground was riddled with resting fungal spores. Fast forward 17 years, these latest nymphs emerge, along with an equally patient fungal hitchhiker. After 7 to 10 days, as the nymphs molt into adults, the fungus starts to take effect, which is really bad news for the cicada. The freaky fungus begins to take over the entire lower abdomen, rupturing the cicada's reproductive organs, rendering it infertile. And eventually, this mass of spores completely replaces the cicada's rear end, creating a kind of fungal plug. Like this infected guy, who's missing his bottom half. But even with half a body, the males still have their uses.
Massospora isn't just a gruesome abdomen-eating organism. This patient fungus has an amazing trick up its sleeve. To ensure maximum spore dispersal, it instigates a crazy zombie sex fest.
The plug contains cathinone, a type of amphetamine. It alters the behavior of the cicadas. It hijacks the sexual signals of the males, compelling them to mimic the wing clicks of a female. These feminine sounds are designed to capture the attention of any uninfected males in the area. The male cicadas attempt to copulate with what they think are females, but they end up with a lot more than they bargained for. The spores then stick to these confused males, and when they fly off to find actual females to mate with, they spread these spores onto the females too. This killer fungus has now spread its precious payload more widely across the brood. And as the infected cicadas continue their mating frenzy, they leave a dusting of fallen spores across the soil.
Where the fungus waits, biding its time, until the cicada life cycle repeats itself. Just another 17 years. It's not the most time-efficient strategy, but it's remarkable the lengths that some critters will go to get ahead in life.
Take a horsehair worm, for example. Lacking a functioning mouth or stomach, this parasitic worm somehow needs to grow 10,000 times its original size to fulfill its life's purpose. To create more horsehair worms. So, it invades the body of an unwitting host to get what it needs. These stringy creatures start their lives as eggs
laid in water. Hatching among the freshwater debris, the minuscule worm larvae need to hitch a ride onto dry land. First step: get eaten. This dragonfly nymph will do nicely, for now. Once inside the nymph, the worm lies dormant within a protective casing, enabling it to survive the dragonfly's metamorphosis. And when an even larger predator eats the dragonfly, the worm goes with it, still alive. Now inside the mantis's gut, it has the space it needs to thrive. The worm larva burrows its way out of the intestines and into the mantis's body cavity, where there's room to expand. Over the coming weeks and months, the worm will sap vital nutrients from the mantis, absorbing them straight through its skin, growing all the time. This can lead to the mantis being castrated as the worm grows to around 30 centimeters long. Or in some cases, up to 2 meters. For a mantis just 7 centimeters long, having such a huge beast bolstered in its belly is going to seriously weigh it down. In their prime, mantis are amazing creatures. Exceptionally stealthy, with lightning-fast reflexes. They are remarkable predators. But for an infected mantis, any food caught just feeds the insatiable worm within, stunting the mantis's own growth. As a result, his wings are underdeveloped, and his legs aren't as big as they should be for his age, meaning he's unable to move properly, with little control of his limbs. And what's worse is he's about to lose control of his mind, too. Now fully grown inside the mantis, the horsehair worm needs to get back to water to reproduce. So this devious puppet master is going to use the mantis, who would normally steer clear of water, to take him there. The worm, now big and strong, is in control, while the mantis, malnourished and malformed, is under its spell. By producing molecules that tap into the mantis's nervous system, the worm is able to manipulate the mantis's perception of reflected light, making it mindlessly fixated on and drawn to shiny surfaces like water. The worm needs the mantis to get as close to the water as possible, and then, for the final hurrah, forces him to leap into the perilous flow. Triggering the worm to wriggle out of its host. Now ready to reproduce and begin the cycle again. For those mantis who survive the ordeal, an even worse fate may await them. If our poor stunted male tries to mate with a female, his loss of fertility will be revealed, and she'll literally bite his head off.
A worm controlling an insect's brain is one thing, but could the same ever occur in a human? Well, in one extraordinary case back in 2021, the unthinkable happened. Nearly.
A woman in Canberra, Australia, was admitted to hospital complaining of a cough, stomachaches, diarrhea, and night sweats. She then started to lose her short-term memory. A CT scan revealed something very unusual, and what the surgeons discovered took everyone by surprise. Buried within her brain, they found an 8-centimeter-long worm. And it was very much alive. What was it? And how did it get there? Now, worms in humans aren't uncommon. We often have various kinds of wiggly invaders in various parts of our bodies, like tapeworms in our intestines and threadworms in our colon. But this worm was different. In fact, it had never been found in a human before. It was believed to be a world-first case, and it wasn't transferred by any of the usual suspects, like a rat or a cat. This worm is usually found in the gut of a snake. A carpet python, to be precise, where it lives undetected by the snake. It has no interest in the snake's brain or mind control. So how on earth did it end up inside a human brain? Well, no one's 100% sure. One theory is the woman had picked and eaten edible leaves near a lake. The infected snake may have excreted the parasite's eggs onto those leaves, which she then ingested. Once the eggs hatched in her intestines, they escaped into her bloodstream. But to end up in her brain, the worm must have crossed the blood-brain barrier, a cellular roadblock that protects the brain from infection. This worm managed to breach that barrier and infiltrate the nervous system, something few parasitic roundworms can do in any host animal, let alone a human. Much of this case is still a scientific mystery. But what we do know is when it comes to viruses and bacteria, 3/4 of new strains found in humans are zoonotic, meaning they originated in animals. So far, these new diseases are not mind-controlling. But the more we encroach onto Earth's last remaining wild places, the greater chance of an invasive body snatcher potentially crossing over into the human realm. On this incredible planet of ours, survival is everything. There are countless organisms which have developed truly ingenious solutions to succeed in the face of adversity, invading bodies and taking control. Their drive to survive means they'll stop at nothing to ensure their own existence. So who knows? Maybe we could be next.